All right, so the next thing I want to show you guys is the opponent. So we've made some changes to the opponent. In here you have a list of your opponents, and if you'll notice up here we have a little button. What this button will allow you to do is merge your opponents. So we have a couple games here, or a couple opponents, and then essentially we've got a Jane Doe and a Jane Doers, and we want to go ahead and merge those games. Now before we do a merge real quick, I want to go ahead and look at the review games real fast. And we'll do a search for a player name. We'll do a search by Jane. So I want to show you that we have a couple games by Jane Doe and one by Jane Doers. And then we've got a John Doe, a Jack Davis, and two Jack Davis. So we'll go ahead and hit the back button here. And then we'll go back one more time and pop into opponents. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge Jane Doe, Jane Doers, and John Doe, since we've got a couple Does and Doers and whatnot. So something to note here with the merging. When you merge opponents, the very first opponent that you choose is going to be the new name for all the opponents. When it does that, it's also going to overwrite the game names as well for the players that played in those games. So if I'm merging all these three players, Jane Doe, Jane Doers, and and then John Doe, it's going to merge all these games together, and then it's going to rename the opponents to whatever that first person that I chose. So it's easier. It's easier just to show than it is to explain. So first, I want to hit the drop down menu, and I want to choose select, and then I'm going to select my player. So the first player, I want everybody to be called Jane Doers. So I'm going to click on Jane Doers first, and then John Doe, and then Jane Doe. After that, it doesn't matter which name you pick. Over here, there's going to be a merge button, which shows two arrows coming together as one. When you press it, on the screen, it's going to tell you the first opponent, Jane Doers, you chose will be the new name of the merged opponents. So it's going to merge those opponents and also those game names as well. So even though I had a game by a John Doe, when it remerges it, it's going to create it as Jane Doers. I was saying Doers, Dowers, whatever. Go ahead and hit the OK button, and then essentially it moves all those opponents off, and now I have a Jane Doers. So if I press on Jane Doers, and then I click on See Games Together, all those games are now shown as Jane Doers games. So even though, so if I go back to the review games, and look in the review games, there's only Jane Doer games now. So I have Jack Davis and Jane Doers. So again, you have to be very careful when using this feature and you're merging opponents, but it's a new feature that we've added in this version. Along with that, in the opponents, I don't know if you noticed, if you saw, but if you press on an opponent, we now have the ability to add that USCF ID and FIDE ID in here for that opponent. So you simply just need to press on the edit button, and then you can fill in those fields. So we'll just put in a fake number for each one, and then hit submit. And now it updates that screen, so you have the FIDE ID and the USCF ID together on that opponent field. So this is the new opponent features. This is how to merge opponents, and this is how to add the USCF ID and FIDE ID. Thanks.